Hi, this is Mark. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about the COVID epidemic and how it's affecting real estate, and I'm going to try to delve into that deeper than I think a lot of people have gone so far, and I'm going to look at what people are saying and why I think that's a gross oversimplification. And finally, I'm going to come up with a solution that I don't think I've heard anyone else talk about, and why I think that would solve a lot of these problems. Now, before I get started, if you could do me a favor and please hit the subscribe button, then I'd really appreciate it, and let's get started. First, let me say that I have a lot of sympathy for the renters who are being affected by COVID, and I know that it's really tough, especially in the hospitality industry. That's been shut down for a long time, and even when it came back, then they had to close it again, and then even when it came back, it's only opened at 25% or maybe 50%, and that it's really difficult when you lose 100% of your income and you can't come back. Then how do you pay your rent? I understand all that, and I don't understand at all the people who don't sympathize with that. They say, oh, just go do something else. But if you're trained in hospitality as a bartender or a cook or a chef or a waiter, what do you just go do? You can't just go be a nurse or an IT tech. It doesn't work like that. You can't just pivot overnight and go do something else. And another problem is that it's a country-wide problem. So even if you were willing to go across the country or to another state, they may have the same problem that you've got right here. And it's not really reasonable, I don't think, for someone to have to go across the country to look for a career in the same industry. So the people who are saying, oh, it's all on them, these people who are unemployed, they're just making bad choices, they're not looking for a job in a different industry or a different place, I think that's ridiculous. So I reject that entirely. Okay, so now let's look at the other side of the situation. People who are putting up signs and saying, no job, no rent. So I can't work, so I'm not going to pay my rent. Well, is that fair? And you might say, well, they don't have the rent, so what are they supposed to do? And just let the landlords eat it. Well, now if you're a big company who owns thousands and thousands of units, then maybe they can do that because you figure not all of the tenants are not going to pay the rent, so they can just eat it for a while or maybe even forever, you think. And maybe that's true, but a lot of landlords are actually small business owners. Maybe they've put their retirement money in that. It's a 4-unit or an 8-unit or it's a single family home. And a lot of them, probably even most of them, have mortgages to pay. So if they don't pay the rent, then how do they pay the mortgage? How do they pay the property taxes? How do they pay the insurance? Because one thing I haven't heard is that the counties are willing to waive the property tax during this. They're not. No one has suggested that. No county has said they're willing to do that. So is it really fair for these small business owners to get no rent, but they're still expected to pay the mortgage, to pay the insurance, to pay their property taxes? And I'm sure the tenants still want everything fixed. They still want the toilet unplugged. They want the roof not to leak, all that. So is that So let's follow this up the food chain. You've got a tenant who doesn't pay the rent, and then you've got a landlord who doesn't pay the mortgage. So then you might say, well, okay, just let the lender eat it. And again, if it's a big corporation, if it's one of the big banks, then maybe that's okay. But is it really fair for them either? Why should they have to eat it? The bank made the loan, and the borrower agreed to pay, and they want to pay, and they should be able to pay, but there's this COVID epidemic that no one expects, and now suddenly they can't pay it through no fault of their own. They haven't done anything wrong, but they can't pay it either. The other thing is that a lot of these big banks will package these loans and sell them off. So actually it's not the big bank who would end up not getting paid, it's some investor. And again, if you say, well, it's a big institution, it's this big firm, this institution, this big investor, they can eat it. Yeah, and maybe they can. But again, not always. Sometimes it's an individual investor. And why should this one person have to eat it and not get paid? So you look all the way up the food chain. The renter doesn't pay the landlord doesn't pay the bank, and then the bank doesn't pay the investor. So everybody loses. Is any of that fair? It's just not as simple as no job, no rent. Okay, so what is the solution? Well, I think at least in the short term, and maybe even in the medium term, there's only one solution, and it's the federal government. They're the only one with the ability and the resources to handle this problem. The good thing is that there is already a program with infrastructure that's in place to handle exactly this problem. The program is called Section 8, or you might know it locally as housing assistance. Section 8 is a federal program that is out of Washington, D.C., but which is administered at the local level. So the funding comes from the federal government in Washington, D.C., but all the paperwork and the administration is done at the city level. What Section 8 does is it allows low-income tenants to receive reduced or even free rent. Landlords are set up in the system and they get their units approved, either apartments or houses, and then the tenants move in, and then the government pays a portion or even all of their rent directly to the landlord. This is perfect for this situation. What the government should do is they should immediately expand the Section 8 program to take any of the people who have been affected by COVID who are having trouble paying their rent and have it administered at the local level and have the local housing assistance office pay their rent directly to the landlord on behalf of the tenant. The good thing is that this program already exists. We already know how to do it. There are already people trained how to do it, and there are already landlords in the system. Also, I'm sure that if the program was expanded because of COVID and there were some landlords who were not getting rent from tenants because of COVID, they would be happy to enter the program at least temporarily. That's the better part. The best part is this: because it's administered locally, there may not be enough people to work the system. There may not be enough employees at the local level to handle this influx of new tenants and new landlords coming into the system. However, the cities that need the program more, that have more tenants who need this, will be able to hire more workers to administer the system. This is a twofold win. You get the tenants to get relief from their rent, and you also take people off the unemployment rolls to find and fund and administer the program for these new tenants. It's a self-fixing problem. The cities that have the biggest need in terms of tenants will also get the biggest benefit in terms of hiring new workers. And again, this is going to come directly from the federal government to the cities, to the landlords. So that's my analysis of the current COVID problem in terms of real estate and what I think about what people are saying, what people are doing, as well as a solution that I think would solve the problem. I would love to hear what you think, what you have to say. Please let me know down in the comments. And if you haven't already hit the subscribe button, I would really appreciate if you would hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.